everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Me, My CTO and I, the podcast that probes and prods into what makes a truly effective technology leader. Helping me to unravel this mystery is my friend, colleague and co-host Sanjay Mistry. Welcome, Sanjay.
Hi, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, great. Now, it's the end of January 2026 as we record this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware, Sanjay, you're a man of history, but the whole concept of resolutions and celebrating the start of a year, kind of loosely 4,000 years ago, the kind of Babylonians celebrated the start of their agricultural year by promising their gods to pay their debts and return all borrowed items and library books. You know, they were very careful about returning their items. And then Christians eventually turned it into this New Year commitment to live life more virtuously. And now I think generally it's just a commitment to try and burn off the Christmas pudding, isn't it? I mean, that's how we've evolved. Are you a New Year resolutions man?
I loosely, yes. So I try to set myself up with something that's not my health, because that's always on the list and it's always a hard one. But this year it's a little bit of what I was doing last year, which is do hard things. So kind of force myself to do hard things and focus. I think, don't waste time doing things. Just focus on the things that really matter. So yeah, they're my two.
How are you getting on so far with those?
The hard things, good. I've booked myself to do a jiu-jitsu competition, which I'm very, very nervous for. And that is very hard. The focus, not so good. But it's one of these. It's for the whole year, not for the first quarter. So let's see.
Yeah, family and other commitments always come in. Yeah, I mean, mine, aside from trying to burn off the Christmas pudding and the mince pies, I love mince pies. I absolutely overindulge on them every Christmas. So time management for me, kind of similar focus thing,
Yeah.
and things like quality over quantity. So creating a bit more time to read more books. I love reading. And again, I think we might have covered this in previous episodes, but you're so busy in the business, you're not sometimes looking, around the business and what's happening in the world. So, and I think so far, Sanjay, touch wood, we're not doing too bad here in the Weaver household. Fireside chat. Now, I'm loving this one. I love all of our guests, but Corey Latislaw is one of our favourites at CTO Academy, and for reasons I'll explain a little after the chat. She does a lot of work for us, but you're covering in the chat creativity and leadership, and through a lot of different ways that you can be creative. Just what's the build up to that chat, Sanjay?
So for me, it's I've always had a view that creativity and technologists don't go hand in hand, and Corey has just disproved me, and I've watched her work, last year at a conference, and I sat behind her and I just watched her, just be creative with some of her drawings, and it was fantastic. And as we went into the chat and she explains things that we do are creative, and I love it. I have so much time for Corey, and diving into something that she's so passionate about was a fantastic thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to, in fact, I've asked our editors to put a couple of the images on screen now, but Corey does some sketches around some of the live work that we do at CTO Academy, and they're just brilliant. They just capture the essence of what can be an hour and a half conversation into these brilliant graphics. And as she, I think, will articulate in the chat, the creativity is going to be a competitive advantage in the age of AI, and therefore I think it's a super important topic. Right, we mustn't go any further without referencing our wonderful sponsors, Sanjay, Mixpanel, and they are an organisation that help you be more creative with your data. So a nice little segue there from the Creative Technologist. So it's not just about reporting on it. It lets you play with your numbers, remix events, segments, time ranges. So you can actually spot patterns and surprises and what-if ideas that you might otherwise miss. Again, those that are familiar with us will know that you're an advocate and a user of Mixpanel. Again, that creativity around data is a kind of key USP for them, isn't it?
It really is. And over the Christmas period, we run a lot of campaigns, and our marketing team had the ability to mix the different types of reports and dashboards that we have, and then change things in real time. And that difference it's huge. So yeah, really, really powerful.
Yeah, thanks again to Mixpanel. They've been great support of CTO Academy generally over the last 12 months. Now, before we go to the chat with Corey, here's a quick one for you. I was sitting working from home as I ordinarily do these days. My daughter kind of romps back from school and sitting there starting to do her homework, and she happens to listen. She has to listen in sometimes to some of the conversations I have with CTO Academy, and she suddenly turned around the other day and said, "Daddy, what is a CTO?" And I thought, oh my goodness, I obviously have not communicated clearly enough if she's asking that question. But it did lead me to think the definition of one's so difficult to nail, I know. But how would you answer that question?
No, it's a difficult question. But so it's a conversation I've been having for a little while, and my view, my personal view on this is, I think when you get to that stage of CTO or CTPO, like, you know, that's the phrase that's being used a lot right now, is you are primarily a business leader, but with a technology slant. And I think that's the difference. You move from technology focus to business focus. And for me, that's the nuance of what makes a CTO. And look, it's different in smaller businesses. You're probably still hands on the keyboard, still a builder. In larger enterprises, it's probably a little bit more political. So again, the landscape changes, you know, at the two ends of the spectrum. But I do believe that pretty much everywhere else in the middle, business focused, and how do you utilize your knowledge and skills in technology to support the organization. So that's how
Yeah, I
I
love
define it.
I love that, Sanjay, you're capturing it like that. Because I tell you the other thing as well that I think is evolving. I mean, technology and the CTO and used to be viewed as a cost center historically. The
Yeah.
legacy is that they were viewed that way. And I think what we've seen, even in the short time we've been around, 5 or 6 years, we've seen the C-suite and the CEO understand that actually the CTO has to become a business leader who oversees
Correct.
the tech. And bringing them forward from their very technical mindset to that more hybrid skill set is at the core of what we do. But also, it's a market shift. It's definitely a market shift of attitude about what the CTO is and what the CTO should be doing for the company. So I absolutely get the definition. So thank you for answering that. I shall be responding to my daughter when she returns back later today. But without further ado, it's Sanjay's Fireside Chat.
Hey Corey, thanks for joining me. Really appreciate you taking the time out. We're going to be talking about the Creative Technologist, which I didn't think that was a phrase that could actually exist. So can we start by you just explaining what that means to our audience?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people think creativity and they immediately go to art. But if you think about what creativity is and all the inventions that have happened throughout the ages, there's a lot of engineering inventions and things like that. Like innovation is a word we're much more comfortable with. But really, when we just conflate creativity with art, it gives us an easy cop out because we're like, oh, well, we can't draw, so I'm not going to even try to be creative. But if you think about any time that you've gone just a little bit beyond the brief, whatever was the bare minimum requirements, you've added a little bit of creative flair there. So we do that in a lot of ways. And when you consider programming as a pursuit and a career, we don't just read Stack Overflow or take exactly what an LLM spits out. We actually spend a lot of time researching, building a model, figuring out what the abstractions are, figuring out how to put them together. Because if we were just copy pasting all the time, that'd be a really boring job.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of creativity that goes into all the small moments that lead up to any of the things we write, all the way up to the system design. And then I have a lot of ways I also apply it in my leadership as well, and to help me be much more creative leader at scale. So there's a lot of different ways that it shows up. Does that help dispel the myth?
I think it does. I think it does. And kind of as you're talking about it, I'm going, yeah. When I've designed big systems, I've definitely had to be like do a lot of lateral thinking because with the restraints that I've had. So I guess if that's creativity, and you're right. As a technologist, I would have called that innovation rather than creativity, but I guess they're one in the same, right?
You bring up a really interesting aspect of it, which is creative constraints. So whenever we have constraints, people kind of think that as a limiting thing, but often that makes us be much more creative with the solutions we come up with, be that time or cost or the people we've got, and then we have to be creative with how we deliver whatever we're delivering.
Yeah, and that, I think that's really interesting, right? Being creative with the skill sets that you have, and then looking at what you need to deliver in the organization and going, well, I can't get any new budgets. How do I cut this? So that's really interesting. So maybe I have got a creative streak in me. I don't know. Let's see if we can figure this out as we continue talking. So what I'd like to go into next is, as a tech leader, based on what you're saying, it sounds like creativity is going to show up in my daily work. So could you give examples? I guess 2 types of examples would be great. So creativity in my daily work, and maybe that are more technology focused, right, in terms of delivery. But then you said something really interesting in terms of how creativity helps you as a technology leader. So it'd be good if you can give some examples on that as well, because I think sharing those examples might make people go, oh, maybe I'm not as bad as I actually think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I think back to when I was purely programming for the first decade of my career, I always, anytime I face a big problem, I would draw what I called pretty pictures. So I would take a break away from the computer, either go to a whiteboard or have fancy pens, big piece of paper, and just figure out how things are flowing, what's broken, what do I need to fix. Sometimes that's with pseudocode, but a lot of times it was much more diagram focused. So I used a lot of creativity there. And nowadays, I've started sketchnoting about 10 years ago, and that's something that I use for a lot of research. And if you're not familiar with sketchnoting, the idea is that you are either watching a talk or maybe you're doing research and you're taking it's kind of a mix of visual notes. So if you look at my basic ones, they're just large words that I've colored in, and then kind of some information architecture around what the types of things I'm looking at are, so the different sections and stuff. So I've always used it a lot in diagramming, and my notes, even my college notes, where I made them in Visio and stuff and then typed them up in Word. So I was pretty mix of visual and text back then even. And then if you're programming, I like to really make the functions read really well, almost like a paragraph or a poem or something. I always thought of it more as kind of how can I read this? How can someone coming in later just read it and understand exactly what's happening, instead of naming everything A and I and stuff like that? It's very difficult to follow what the heck's going on. So all my function names are very descriptive, and I love a refactor, so I always make anything I'm touching prettier than when I got there in the end. So that was more at the technologist level, but also you need to communicate in any role that you've got. So this is kind of the bridge between the 2 areas, because even as individual contributor, you need to be able to communicate what is the thing I'm building. So building architecture diagrams and things like that. Now you could put really ugly boxes, or maybe you could add a little bit of color. So I'm right now doing org design at the organization I'm at, and I've got different boxes and different colors for the types of functional roles I have. So I have back-end, front-end, Android, iOS, but I also have a designer director in our area, and she came up with a color scheme for all the 7 teams, so they each have a color scheme. So I've applied that to my org chart. So if you look at mine, it's very pretty and visual. Everybody else's is just a few boxes and lines, but you can use it there, and that helps to communicate as well, because then you can quite clearly see who's doing what and the different teams, and they just kind of pop out at you. So that's one way you could use creativity in leadership. Also, kind of thinking about creative constraints and strategic problem solving. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but one of the things I did at my last role is we had a very large bench of engineers, which isn't usually a great thing at a consulting firm. And the immediate thought was, oh, let's reduce costs or let's retrain. But I found a creative path instead, because we had pipelines of work coming in from both our partners, Google and Microsoft. So we already had IT approved playgrounds and some work that we wanted to do. So I used that those 2 things together to basically create an innovation lab out of the engineers I had on hand. So we made about 50 proof of concepts and 9 months, and made about $2 million out of that. So then I was able to save jobs. I was able to sell it. It's still a program that's running today. But the non-creative way to do it would just be able to just lay everybody off. But instead, I turned a liability into an asset by thinking more creatively and zooming further out on, well, how might I solve this differently?
That's amazing. I want to come back on some of those things that you've just said, because the organogram, the org structure diagram that you said. So in color coding it, I've done that for years, and I've never thought that about. I never thought in my head that's creativity. I always thought that's a good way of communicating. So I've always used different colors, and especially when I'm asking for budget and saying, right, we need to employ these people over the next 6-12 months, I color code. This is who I want in Q2. This is who I want in Q3. This is who I want in H1 of next year. And it's interesting you say that is creativity, and I guess creativity and the art of communication all tie together. So creating those more standout visuals, I guess, make a difference, right?
Yeah, then also you kind of touched on it a little bit. There's storytelling in there as well. So you can be creative in the way that you construct the story. You can be creative in the visuals that you bring to it, to like you talking about pitching for budget. But you can do it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I find this fascinating, because maybe I'm more creative than I thought. So there's a win out of this conversation.
Creative. So.
But you were talking about kind of architecture diagrams, and again, when I've been in board meetings and presenting to the board in terms of this is something new we want to do, a new venture, a new service, a new product, and I've kind of had to pitch the product idea and all the different components. Again, I've created quite a visual diagram, so no words, because no board wants to kind of read words in a presentation. And again, I've used lots of color, and I've used lots of, kind of different colored arrows, and I've used, again, the way I've done the annotation is using different color schemes to highlight different elements. So, this is MVP, this is phase 1, this is phase 2, and so on. Or this is customer focused and this is supplier focused, if you've got a customer and supplier side. So I guess all of those things in your through your lens would be creativity, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then there's even more ways that it shows up. So if you think about meeting design, you could just come in and talk about something, or maybe you could design it so there's an output at the end of it. So I like to use Miro a lot. So I'll design a workshop pretty much for anything. I love workshops. And those are also quite colorful. But the way that you design it and have instructional design, because I also really like teaching and building workshops and stuff for teaching people. So I kind of bring a lot of those aspects to it as well. So that's one of the things about creativity, is like it transfers to other areas of your life. So that knowledge transfer, sometimes you bring explicitly things from other areas into what you're doing. Sometimes it just kind of intuitively pops up. So I didn't really make the connection until about a year or two ago that like, oh yeah, my teaching background and interests kind of that's leads into my meeting design and stuff. It's just one of those things that kind of like came over some of the things I'd learned previously. And you can also use it in your coaching as well. So I officially went to like a class last year for 6 months to learn executive coaching. Right. And there's a whole section around creative techniques. So people often end up at this block state and they don't know how to get out of it. But your job as a coach is not to tell them how to get out of it. It's to help them get out of it themselves. So you can kind of come in a different way and help them think differently. So, for example, maybe you're going to use a mind map and have them just draw a bunch of bubbles and lines, or maybe you pull out a coaching image deck and you ask them to pick up a card that speaks to them, and then they'll start talking, and then they'll start to have their own realizations by doing that. Or maybe you have them talk to them. So if they have a conflict they want to work through or something internal they want to work through, you can do a chair conversation where they jump back and forth between the two chairs and embody that person. You could do visualizations. There's all sorts of different ways that you can take people to a different place that kind of takes them out of their, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do, and kind of help them move forward.
And I guess, kind of, really great examples there. And going back to your innovation lab, again, that's amazing, where you turned a problem into a profit center. It's kind of, I guess, using your creativity to think laterally about what's in front of you. So whether it's a problem or something that you knew that you're trying to build, or like you said, with your coaching, you're trying to help someone work through a problem. It's just trying to be a little bit more lateral, and it sounds like make it a little bit more fun so people engage different parts of their brain, right?
Yeah, creativity is like this playful thing. That's one of the things when we get to the practice later. What's really nice about it is it just brings more fun and some of that childhood wonder back to life. But if you think about what creativity actually is at its core, there's this great quote by Steve Jobs, don't have it off the top of my head, but the idea is it's just about connecting things. And creative people feel guilty when someone asks them how they did it, because I don't know, like for me, it seems quite obvious. I mean, you would make an innovation lab out of those people, but it was not obvious, because if it was, it would have already been done. I do a lot of like research and looking at the field of the problem and stuff, and like you said, lateral thinking, like trying to understand the holistic system and the, you know, all the system pieces that are going in there, and then I can kind of find those gaps, bring them together. So that's how I end up creating things.
It's interesting. So I just last final bit on this, because you use the word connecting the dots, and every time I have created a strategy document, kind of from a blank sheet of paper, right? If it's not just iterations, I always start with diagramming, and I always start kind of, here are our goals, here are our problems, this is what I've got to work with, this is what I could go and get. And I create so many diagrams that typically don't end up in my in my final strategy, in my final documentation. But they help me, like you said, connect the dots in terms of where I'm trying to get to. Because I don't know my journey. I just know this is how I need to go on my journey when creating this strategy document. But it's connecting those dots, and again, I do use a lot of diagramming and a lot of brainstorming techniques and a lot of pen and paper or whiteboard, like you said, and that just kind of gets it out. I also like to do it in cycles, because my creative brain is not very good, so I need lots of cycles.
Give yourself a little bit more credit there.
I don't know.
For you. So like even in like if you're going to make art, I'm often process driven. So I might iterate with ChatGPT 10, 20 times to find like aspects of a thing that I like, and then combine them all together. And then when I was doing an illustration class, each week I had a new assignment, and I would go and do all my mood board thumbnails, and then try and do like 4 or 5 different iterations. Then I would continue to whittle it down. So I use like agile triple diamond sort of thing, like go wide, come back in, go wide, come back in, and it sounds like you're doing that intuitively and not giving yourself credit for the creativity you're bringing.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, thank you.
Like there are so many bad strategies out there, so many like invisible strategies where nobody's written it down, but going through that systems thinking and trying to diagram it all out to help you get to the point where you're like, oh, actually this is the very clear thing that we're doing, and maybe you come up with an acronym at the end of it. And so like one of them, I had vibes, but I did the vibe hand, so it made it less cringe.
I'm a big fan of cycling everything. So especially when I'm doing a big piece of work, and I'll brain dump, and I've got to leave gaps and have another cycle and another cycle. And I can't remember which book it was that I was reading, but it was your brain is most powerful when you're not actually actively thinking. So when you're sleeping or in the shower and people have that aha moment, it's because the cognitive power in your brain is not when you're awake. It's kind of when you're asleep and focused on something else. And that's why you get those aha moments when you wake up in the middle of the night. And I strongly believe in kind of doing cycles on things, and people rushing things, just you don't get the creative juices, I guess. Maybe I'm allowed to say that now. Just quick segue before I ask you my next question is, and we'll put this in the podcast notes, but Corey did mention at the top of this part of the segment that she does a lot of sketchnoting, and she does quite a lot of sketchnoting for CTO Academy. And they are amazing. I'm not just saying that because she's our guest today, but they are amazing. And I've seen her sketchnote live, and I was in awe of how she how she did it. So we'll post some links on the podcast so everyone can have a look and see what she does, and contact Corey if you need some help and advice on this. But yeah, they're very phenomenal. Okay, so let's carry on. So you kind of touched on it in terms of my creative muscle. And I'm a strong believer in this, right? I think in anything that you want to get good at, so whether it's coding or doing something in the gym or a martial art, I always talk about martial arts, you've got to build a muscle, right? So and it sounds like I have been building my creative muscle, maybe I just didn't know what it was. So how do I go about creating the creative muscle? What advice would you give to people? And where can that lead me? So I guess if I took myself from a couple of years ago and we were having this conversation and we were talking about creativity, I would have run away from it, right? But that's probably not a good thing, and it would probably limit me. So why should I not be so scared, and why should I do this? And what opportunities do you think it can give me if I kind of start, enhancing my creative muscle?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the end of that, because one of the things I think is going to be really important in this age of AI is bringing the humanness to solving problems, building things, etc. So I fundamentally believe that creativity is going to be your competitive advantage as the world of AI continues to ramp up. So I would say there's a practical benefit to it. We'll talk about the fun side of it, but I think there's a huge fun side of it as well. And I mentioned learning transfer earlier, but it just kind of it jumps to other areas of life and stuff. I find it just popping up in every aspect of life. It's just an inexhaustible well of creativity. Like, you can't run out of creativity. Actually, the more you practice it, the more it continues to flow. Now, I think a lot of people get stuck on, like you were saying, well, I'm not creative, I don't even know where to start. I think one of the things to think through is, okay, well, what is the medium that you want to, or the outlet you want to work in? So for me, that is sketchnoting and doing physical art, and I'll talk about some of the things I do in a moment. But that's not the only way to practice creativity. It could be in cooking. It could be in music. A lot of technologists I know are musicians as well. And I used to think, well, I'm not creative because I'm just reading, because I was classically trained on the flute. Like, I'm just reading what's written there and I'm just playing that. But, I add vibrato to things at some points and stuff. So actually I was being creative in where I was applying expression to the music I was making. So music's a way. Maybe you like theater and you're doing like community theater stuff, or there's lots of different ways. You might be creative in your parenting and stuff and coming up with games to play with your children. So it can show up in a lot of different ways, and you could choose a different way you want to practice. And a lot of times I find that people end up intimidated by looking at some of my art, which I don't think is still very good, even 15 years later practicing it. But if you want to be good at art, cool, start learning it and get better at it. But that doesn't have to be the way you go. It's just the one I have the most experience with. So if I think back to my creative journey, and it's easy to see it more in hindsight than it is, when you're in it. But I was crafty as a kid. My mom did ceramics and taught us how to sew, and I did embroidery, and I made friendship bracelets and lots of stuff like that. And I did more jewelry in my 20s. And for Christmas, I decided I wanted to learn a new medium each year and make something for my family with it. So one year I did cross stitch. One year I did watercolor, terrible at watercolor. Another year I did oil painting, also terrible at oil painting. And yeah, there was also a book I read around that time called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which I highly recommend if you want to learn drawing specifically. It helps you get to realistic portraiture by the end of it, but it also teaches you the component skills of drawing. Like, instead of drawing the thing, you draw the negative space around the thing, and then something pops up. So if you've got a lady doing complicated yoga pose you're trying to draw, if you draw the angle between her legs, if she's doing like a 4 or whatever, then it makes it a lot easier to make the shape kind of come out of that. So it was just really interesting to think about it in a different way and think about those component skills. And if you want to learn how to do digital art, there's loads of things on YouTube that you can watch around. I love Procreate, the app. So there's a lot of artists who show their process. They actually talk you through all the little buttons you click and stuff too, or maybe you just watch their draw through and then you can pick up your own workflow ideas from that. I do a lot of sketch noting, which, I started by going to lots of conferences when I was conference speaking quite frequently. I still do it a fair amount, but back then I was going a lot. And I would try and do the sketch note for every session of the conference. I have chilled out on that because it is a bit tiring if that's all you're doing. But you said you've seen me live doing it. I think that was at the Mixpanel one, right? But yeah, so I have a blended process now where I have a Remarkable tablet that I write on that, and then I'll do the iPad is the real art. How else do I practice it? I mentioned that I'm very process driven. That helps a lot because if you are staring at a blank page, a lot of times it's really intimidating. So if instead you go and do some research on the types of vibes you want to bring to the piece you're going to make, or maybe you have a starter. So a lot of times in my notebook, I will just paint. I have these Posca pens. I'll paint a page and it'll just be a blank page later that has a colored background ready for me to draw on. So then I don't have to start from a blank page anymore. Or maybe it's a small little flower that you start out with, or maybe it's a do list to just kind of help you get into it. I also use Pomodoro timers. They're great for pretty much everything in life.
Yes.
So if I'm feeling resistance, so I'll get into that. And if I'm feeling resistance on, let's say it's a conference talk that I'm trying to write, I might start by sketch noting, and then maybe I'll get blocked there, and then maybe I'll go do some of the slide cards or whatever that I want to do, or work on the slide illustrations and stuff. So I kind of bump between multiple projects when I feel stuck. So that's another thing you might want to try. That was a lot of jumble of stuff. Anything else you want to dive into around that?
No. I think it's really interesting because it's just ideas, right? And I think my takeaway from it is don't be scared, give it a go. Creativity it can be art. I mean, like you said, it's art for you. But there was something you said that was interesting, that you're very process driven, right? And I would have categorized a person that's process driven here, on my left hand side, and all the way on the opposite side on my right hand side, I would have put a creative person. But actually, you are both, right? And that kind of does say that they're not negatives of each other. And
yeah, even, I've gone to many artists things like Picasso. There was a Picasso and paper thing, and it showed all of his tiny little drawings. Leonardo da Vinci, tons and tons of drawings that led to the actual art piece in the end.
And I guess that's creativity is a process, right? Mm-hmm. So whether it's art or music or watercolor or whatever, right? It's a step-by-step process, and don't think you're going to get there on day zero, and you might not get there in 15 years, but it's a journey, like everything in life, right? It's a journey, and you've got to embrace the journey. So I think that's some really good advice. I guess, the last bit I want to unpick on that is, if I don't embrace my creative self, just on this segment, if I don't embrace my creative self, what's it going to do for me as a leader? I guess it's going to hold me back, right? I guess it's not going to let me get there.
Yeah, I feel like it really helps to open up the possibilities, especially around, if you think it just on creative problem solving.
Yeah.
Innovation, I do think it's going to hold you back. So I think it's really important to embrace it. And we didn't talk too much about the fun side of it, but it really is fun, especially if you find something that you can get into flow. It's kind of like when you're programming and you're enjoying flow. The same thing happens when you're creating. And I've found that actually the thing with my talk, the Creative Technologist, is I don't know why, but I've found that practicing my creativity makes it easier for me to access flow in pretty much all my different areas and stuff. I think there's a lot of brain science behind it, but I would recommend practicing it because I think it'll take you to new places that you didn't expect to go.
It's there's not many days that go by or hours that go by when I don't talk about martial arts, and I'm going to bring this in, and then I'm going to ask you the final question because everyone's bored of me talking about martial arts. But it's the very same. So I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's very creative because you learn techniques and you stitch them together in creative ways, and it's the stitching it together in creative ways that kind of defeat your opponent, right? Or whatever defeat looks like in a martial art combat. Creativity can, I guess, the big takeaway I want for people is creativity can be anything, but practice something, and practice doing lateral thinking, I guess, right? And getting something out of your brain down, whatever down means. So I guess final question is jump off point, right? So what single piece of advice, I always ask this kind of question, right? What's a single piece of advice that you give to people to start their creative journey, to find, how do I find my creative self? What do I do? Like if I'm new to this, I'm new, I'm on the bottom of the ladder of my leadership journey. I need to think about creativity to become better at what I'm doing. What would be a good starting mentality or starting point for me as somebody new into this space?
Yeah, so a practical thing that I can give you is there's a book that I really enjoyed called The Artist's Way. It's by Julia Cameron. So it's all about basically two practices. One, I don't do this one as frequently, but free writing in the morning for 30 minutes and just get all the bad stuff out of your head. And then sometimes you'll find patterns as you do it, and it might lead to new ideas. So that's one practice you can do. I'm not terribly great at continuing to do that. But the other one that I love is called an artist date. So the idea is you take yourself out, do something only for you. Maybe that's the zoo because you love animals, or maybe for me, one of the days was going to vintage shops and looking for vintage art supplies and things like that. Another one I took myself on was I went to the Van Gogh museum. I have gone there, but I went to the Van Gogh exhibit at the National Gallery earlier this year. And then I went to a coffee shop and brunch shop afterwards and drew what I saw. So that was one of the dates I took myself on. Maybe it's roller skating because you used to love that and you haven't done it in years. Or maybe you're going to go to a concert because you really want to get back into doing music and stuff. But the idea is you take yourself out, time just for you. I would suggest at least 4 hours, but if you can make it a whole day, great. Just take a day off work, go have fun. And then, you could maybe make something at the end of it, but you don't have to. You could just enjoy yourself. And I try and do those weekly.
I like that. Mine, not as good as yourself, but it's Lego, and I get
There's
that.
no comparison here. Lego's great. And
I think that'll probably resonate with a lot of people, especially if you've got children in your house, and it's playing.
Well, you don't need children. I've got all the flower ones. They're gorgeous.
It's so much fun, right? And unfortunately, I bought my children lots of Lego because I like playing with it as well, especially the stuff that moves. But I guess very good, Corey. It's like always, when I'm talking to you, it's lots of fun. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I hope everyone's got lots out of it like I have. Corey, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to be here.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sanjay, like you, I love the work that Corey does. We put a few examples of her sketches earlier in the episode so people can see that, and we'll put a reference as well to Corey's work elsewhere. I suppose from my perspective, reflections from it, creativity equals innovation. It's really interesting. She talked a lot about using different colors in design org charts, and the creativity shows up in diagrams and all that kind of stuff, which again, from a non-technical perspective, was quite interesting. And here's the one I really took away from it that was fascinating, was that you build the muscle across all forms of art. Which, if you think about it, is absolute. Of course, it's true. So, art, music, theatre, even parenting, which was an interesting perspective with Corey. What did you think?
So for me, the one that made me feel very happy, just being a technologist, was when we draw diagrams. So everyone will be using Miro all the time. Actually, that's creativity, and I love that fact, and it was a big aha moment for me when I was talking to Corey. And I think, that along with that creativity helps with communication. And I remember when we were talking about org charts, and when I've designed org charts, especially when I'm pitching to the board for more money, and I've used different colors in my organogram to go, this is the phasing of how I want the money, so I can, this is how I'm going to build the team out. And she was like, well, that's just creativity. And that's just a good way of communicating. And again, in terms of reflection, it's like, oh, maybe I am a little bit creative, but it's just coming out in a different way. I don't do art, don't draw, I'm pretty terrible. But actually, seeing creativity from different angles is worth it. And for me, especially, aligning that with communication is just, that was great to hear it from Corey, and it's great, satisfaction from hearing that as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, listen, we're going to close off. Apologies again, I referenced my side hustle earlier. I hope CTO Academy don't mind me, or Mixpanel, I have to say, don't mind me intruding slightly with the fact that I did launch a game called Threeology this year. I'm sure you can see it on screen. I pumped into Perplexity, Sanjay, who they viewed as the top 3 CTOs of all time. I'm going to put it on screen in a moment for those that are watching. Would you have any idea what they might have come up with?
Oh my God, it's like you're bringing back the quiz.
Let me tell you, everybody, that Sanjay always used to say after the quiz that he would have got them all right. So this is an interesting test.
So I'm going to have the Google founders. I'm going to guess one of the Google founders will be there. So maybe Sergey Brin. The Microsoft CTO, I forget his name. I'm going to guess maybe him. As much he was never a CTO, I want to say Bill Gates as well, because he was an out-and-out technologist. Go on, Andrew.
Okay, well, I will pop up the answers on screen and also the reasons that they gave. But Werner Vogels at Amazon, I think his work with AWS is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Ray Ozzie, I think that was the Microsoft guy that you were mentioning. And someone I hadn't heard of before, I confess, was Padmasree Warrior at Cisco.
Of course! Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So those were the 3 that Perplexity came up with as the top 3 CTOs of all time.
That's really interesting. Very
well.
Cool.
I'm sure you were just outside, just off the podium, Sanjay. But on that happy note,
yeah.
on that happy note, we're going to go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.